Hi, and welcome to Be More Now. My name is Blake Moore, and tonight I'm talking with three poets, Jeffrey Bartfeld, Suzanne Arrhenius, and Jamie Zukowski, as well as musician Brian Abbott. Part live performance, part conversation, tonight's show highlights their two books of ekphrastic poetry, Sonoma Valley Sonnet and A Poet's Portrait of Point Reyes. We'll discuss the collaborative creative process, writing from nature, photography, inspiration, and more. Plus, poets Bartfeld, Arrhenius, and Zukowski will do a live reading while accompanied by live guitarist Brian Abbott. First up, I'm going to play a song to get us all in the mood, a beautiful acoustic song by Italian guitar virtuoso Marco Cirillo. So tonight's show is going to have a little bit of a different format. First, we're going to listen to a live reading with our poets accompanied by our musician, and then we'll have an interview. But I want to tell you a bit about our performers and artists. We have the leader of the group, Jeffrey Bartfeld, who orchestrated 2 books of ekphrastic poetry, A Poet's Portrait of Point Reyes and Sonoma Valley Sonnet. He finds much of its inspiration in trekking up mountains, ambling through cool forests, and listening to gurgling streams. And the Sonoma Valley Sonnet is a collaborative effort with Suzanne Arrhenius and Jamie Zukowski. Sweden-born Arrhenius has a PhD in evolutionary plant biology and loves that the language of poetry allows her to explore the intersection between emotional and physical worlds. Former mayor, master gardener, actor, and activist, Zukowski holds a master's in creative writing from the University of Colorado and had a regular column of creative essays entitled At Home in the Wine Country in the Weekly Calistonian before she retired from the vineyard. Brian Abbott is a multi-instrumentalist who has joined Bartfeld, and the 2 of them regularly perform poetry with music. I'm going to start us off with a live reading. Enjoy as each poet, accompanied by Abbott when appropriate, explores rural Sonoma County's pastoral yet vulnerable nature, its climate, streams, woodlands, terroir, the glorious night sky, and the very air we breathe.
Okay, Blake, we're very excited, so thank you for this opportunity. So the book that I'm going to read from first, and I'm going to share with Jamie and Suzanne, is the Sonoma Valley Sonnet, a book of poems and images, and those are where all 3 of us contributed poetry to. So the first poem that I'd like to share is called Another Season. Now, the interesting thing about this poem is it's about my wife. We're in the latter stages of our life, and she has this vineyard she's trying to figure out what to do with, and this poem is about that. Now, the image for the listeners is a vineyard, but it's a very tall vineyard. The rootstock is tall, so the image is taken from underneath the vineyard, and you see the green leaves and the yellow leaves, so you know it's fall, and the brown leaves are on the ground on top of this sort of blonde sand. The poem is Another Season. In long-shadowed morning light he stands, one leg bent at the knee, stained overalls, torn pockets. He leans cross-armed on the wooden shaft of his shovel, feet comfortable in the seams of clumped earth. Fragrant whiffs of spring drift by. He can almost hear lime green leaves on blackened rootstock unfurling in new warmth. He recalls past seasons, rain snapping buds off cordons in late spring, rust-brown botrytis rot in late summer, black starlings puncturing plump Chardonnay grapes just before harvest. He turns his head to the east, peers down rows of thick trunks, remembers full-bellied grape clusters glistening and cool in his hands. He straightens his leg with measured tugs. He slips on gray leather work gloves. So that's Another Season from the Sonoma Valley Sonnet book. I'd like to, at this point, turn over to Jamie Zukowski, who will read one of her poems.
All of the poems in Sonoma Valley Sonnet are accompanied by the photographs of Jeffrey Bartfeld. And the poem that I'd like to read this Sunday morning was stimulated by the photograph of the Sonoma Valley from the south that Jeffrey took, which captures all of the valley from that direction, and yet it is all nature, the green of late winter with a burnished golden sky. And my poem this Sunday morning is about the feeling in Sonoma on March 19th, 2020, when California issued stay-at-home orders during our pandemic, when life slowed and returned to nature. Thank God for this Sunday morning. Human traces of a week, a month, a moment. Time's circle turning, trees and grasses assuring a return of what we name spring. Thank Sol, our lucky star, we have cycles for our moon. That darkness will return tonight for sleep, and dawn will wake the living to begin again. Thank one another we know a belonging, still grasp the wavering lifeline of kinship, keeping us afloat, our commonality in this now vast family. This Sunday morning, through my western window, the dark wings of a turkey vulture unsettle a crystal blue sky. Over rooftops, above today's deserted streets, like the migrant stork of nursery rhymes, she circles, chooses the chimney pipe of the tallest house on the block. From her high perch, she turns her back to the east, stretches her wide expanse of wings to dry her blackened feathers of the morning dew. A mate faces her at a distance from the top of a leafless tree. This Sunday morning, like none I can remember, delivers an unfamiliar quiet to town and country. Still, out of doors, one may hear the faint music of birds. Birds, our long companions, sing this morning as they always do. Some seek mates, build shelter, feed, bathe, teach one another. All day we hear announcements, where there is food, safety to gather, and when to flee. How each one knows their job for the group. This Sunday morning, a single bird stretches its wings high above the rest. A turkey vulture, this day, in her vulnerable pose, heart exposed, closes her eyelids to feel only the sun on her back. Does she sense somewhere the presence of another to keep her kind, living? So it must be for everyone, every family, every species on this good earth.
This is Suzanne Arrhenius, and I am going to read a poem based on an image that shot by Jeffrey of a horse in a dry grass field with the Sonoma Hills in the distance. It's a familiar scene from this area, maybe comforting and not so unusual, but beneath the surface, maybe slightly unsettling. Twilight. The sun is setting behind the trees. Clouds are smudging the sky lavender above the blazing yellow summer grass. The horse is quiet, turns her head to what is not yet visible, hears in the distance the sound of a man. The day is dense, tilted up with wire and falling fences. Blades of grass, each living thing, is protected in its dusty skin, separated from this ferocious world. While twilight furrows the hills, gullied with shadowing oaks, in a softened remembering, faintly the light calls from a great distance, as though it were not inevitable, this endlessness. Now, Jeffrey.
The next poem I'm going to read is called Witness. And the image that goes with it is dancing trees. And so at 3 a.m. in the morning, I'm driving down the Point Reyes Petaluma Road, hustling out to Point Reyes to catch the dawn light. And all of a sudden, these trees come into view as I'm driving along, and I pull over and I take this image. And this image, in the background, you have this misty sky. You have these small hills that are way back there. Then you have these marvelous trees that look like they're dancing, and they're reflected on this silver pond. And that's the image that goes with this poem. And the poem is Witness. At dawn, the trees begin to dance, first light unfolding, the land forming its shape again, their dark reflections on a silver pond. The trees don't know anyone is watching their secret, sacred dance, their dance of prayer and praise. Across the pond, I kneel in dew-softened grass, beside a fence rich in honeysuckle. The scent of a new day, sweet in my mouth. Now, I'd like to share two more poems. I am now in the Point Reyes book, if that didn't become obvious. The next one is entitled The Cathedral of Drake's Bay. And the image is view from Drake's Head. Now, Drake's Head is this very high cliff that overlooks Drake's Bay. So the image is as follows. You've got this beautiful dark sky in the background. It's dark because all these images are in black and white. And the clouds are rising into the sky, and far out you can see the Pacific Ocean. You have these land circling, semicircle around Drake's Bay. And below you is Limitor Spit, which people always hike on, and you can watch them from this cliff that you're standing on. And lastly, there's a very dark pool of water right below the cliff. So the poem is entitled The Cathedral of Drake's Bay. In the afternoon, hiking on a red clay path, I hear the soft singing of the wind among the trees. Listen to a nearby creek, burbling and rustling as it weaves its way to the sea. Atop the white cliff of Drake's Head, in a dip in the earth, I wonder at the Cathedral of Drake's Bay, whose flocks of clouds rise like spires, and whose watery womb is as silent as a nave. The salt breath of the sea brushes my eyes like butterfly wings, tingles in my nose like spring's first pollen, and I can no longer tell where my body ends and the roots and the blades of the grasses beside me begin. Then the gentle pause of evening approach, step by step. The tide begins to ebb. Shorebirds sweep the surf line. And I know in this world I could share no greater treasure. The last poem is Pacific Sunset, and the image is also Pacific Sunset. Now, I have to tell you, when I finish a day of walking around Point Reyes and missed all this spirituality there, I like to end it by the lighthouse, and there's a sandy patch by the side of it. And I'll sit down there and I'll watch the sunset, and that will be the end of my day, typically at Point Reyes. Now, the image is almost all black, and it has these two clouds. You can see the outline, and they're up against the sun. And the sun is throwing this light across the water. So the poem is entitled Pacific Sunset. One fall evening, I sat on the sandy shore, watching the dark of night crawl into the sky, and muscular clouds shove the sun against the horizon. The stars were lost in swollen black. Pebbled sand bit the palms of my hands. A cold wind clawed my neck. Yet the sun, buffeted and bruised, tossed a golden cord across the back of growling water to my bare feet, a warm promise of tomorrow. Suzanne, next.
Okay. Jeffrey, maybe you could describe the image of this oak, this very iconic oak in Sonoma on page 7. And my poem is called Dreamed Out in Words.
The image of the oak, you have in the sky this dark sky, kind of stormy. You've got these hills that are dark in the background, and a line of trees that are in autumn color. Then there's this wide expanse of green pasture, and here's this oak all alone with its brown fall leaves, just standing there solitary, almost like it's looking at you.
This poem is inspired by this image of this slightly off-center tree under a sultry and stormy sky. It's a description of love and torment and desire and the dilemma of expressing passion in words, dreamed out in words. How to explain desire if not by hanging words onto slim branches, dreamt in secrecy, drops strung naked, quivering, adding their small tears to the wind. From out here you are a stranger, and I fall through a funnel of air to meet you. Drive through the night, through clusters of dust and fire, reckless as never before, toward the words you hold back. Love is merciless in the way it travels, blazes in the insanity of ecstasy no one believes in, keeps on emitting light. Your eyes black make me the only color you see, tremble and shake when I touch you. Silence shakes me, pale as glass. At the mercy of June's torrents of light, widespread fire strives to break into blossom. Fluorescence suns me, pollen's heat. Lucky not to forget the rawness without which we disappear into words alone, dangerous, invulnerable.
And this is Jamie Zukowski again. The closing image in the poem of Jeffrey's photograph is a sunset portrait of the Sonoma Valley, which captures both the settled portion of the town of Sonoma, as well as in the foreground, the agricultural, and then the hills beyond. And this sunset portrait of clouds coming at sunset, suggesting the humidity and the possible rains from the west, from the ocean, made me, as a former grape grower and environmentalist, recall the importance that we are all dependent on that water and that cycle of water. So the closing poem is Blessing. As sleep restores the body and the mind after long days in toil of any kind, how blessed we are in this forgiving place. Despite a season's heat, the loss of rains, our streams and wells retreating fast, and we are as spent as the leaves and grass. Evening brings each day a healing grace when tireless sun reclines in softer shades. Ambers and garnets meld with the golden hills. Ocean air begins its wisp through folds and fields. A vaporous blanket returns a blessing. this generous land's renewal, cooling.
The last poem that I'd like to add to this, and it's from the Sonoma Valley Sonnet book, which is, as you know, frankly, a really very beautiful book. So the image is called Rebirth, and the poem is also entitled Rebirth. Now, the image, you have this sky out there, then in the background you have these Mayakama mountains, and they're completely brown. And that's because the fire has burnt everything off of those mountains. There is nothing there. In the foreground, you have this lush green vineyard surrounded by some small trees that are also green. The poem has an epigraph: fire to ashes, ashes to dust. Rebirth. A brown coat cannot conceal the sorrow. In the belly of the mountain, from its navel, the future buds. So that's the poem. I like it particularly because it really shows the resiliency of our valley, our beautiful Sonoma Valley.
I'd like to take a moment to remind you that you're listening to Be More Now right here on KZYX. I'm speaking with three poets of Sonoma Valley: Jeffrey Bartfeld, Jamie Zukowski, and Susanna Arrhenius. And they're reading from their two books, A Poet's Portrait of Point Reyes and Sonoma Valley Sonnet. Keep listening.
Now, there is one thing I wanted to mention. I don't know if this makes sense or not, Blake, but I'm a firm believer that every poem is waiting for its music, frankly. And I think that goes to the roots of poetry. As you know, poetry precedes history. Now, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that poetry was around before there was an alphabet or before any way of writing things down. And so poetry was chanted or sung or at least recited, and it passed along from one generation to the other generation, the history and traditions and the culture of a tribe or a society. And so I always think that poetry needs its music, and that poetry should be performed, not read, performed, and a poet is a performer. That's my belief, and that's behind a lot of the work that we've done here as a group.
I like that. I would love to hear about the four of you and how you connected and what inspired you to make the Sonoma Valley Sonnet Poems and Images book.
I'm going to speak for Jeffrey. He's definitely a ringleader, and I've been in poetry for a long time. I'm a Californian from way back, and I've always had this maybe just sort of simmering in the background. But strangely, I had to come all the way to Sonoma to fulfill that. And I think Jeffrey's been one of his gifts, really wonderful gifts, is bringing people together. And he's a passionate artist. And he was so generous in inviting me to participate in this book. It's been a real wonderful journey. We've read from it. We just collected around it for a while now. I would say that all this poetry is sort of coming to full bloom here for me.
That's
there you
beautiful.
Go.
Yes, so well said, Suzanne. And I felt also very honored to be asked to collaborate on this. And it's just such a wonderful thing to come together, in fact, to meet over poetry, because we became friends and collaborators through poetry. And I also, I returned to poetry in coming to Sonoma town. My husband and I were in agriculture previously in Sonoma County, and now living in our historic and beautiful Sonoma town, I have been able to devote more attention to this way of communication. It has enriched this time of my life, and how wonderful to be able to express in Sonoma Valley Sonnet our love of this place, that for eons human beings have loved this Valley of the Moon.
Let me just add, this is Jeffrey again. I do believe that poetry is about connections. I'm happy to say that the three of us have connected through poetry, and then Brian has joined us through poetry. He's also a poet besides a musician. And I think the beauty of, and what I mean by connections, not only did we connect because we were in a class together, but if you read a poem from someone who wrote it 100 or 200 years ago, you're still connecting with that person over time. And I think that is absolutely amazing.
They're timeless poems. And I think there is something about the language that you speak, that we speak as poets, capturing the mood and the feeling of the time. But because it's nature, you just kind of be at any time, right? Other than a seasonal time.
Yes, I agree. I think it's timeless in certain ways. So Brian was going to talk a little bit about how he connected with us. And
thank you for the interview, Blake. We're at Vintage House in a poetry group, and so we often discuss poetry and read poetry together and share poetry, edit, critique, and definitely has brought us close together. And one of the things that I found myself doing was we're always having a discussion about the musicality, the intersection of music and poetry. And so what I did, Jeffrey gave me a gift of his book, and I happened to be sitting on my porch on like a rainy day or something like that, listening to a chime and playing my guitar. And I just started looking at it, and then I started kind of applying myself and looking for moments of tension in the poem and the story as it develops and the metaphors develop, and trying to find tones that went with that expressed my understanding of that piece of the poem. And so that's the gift that these poems have given me is they give me moments of calm introspection, and I just feel very peaceful and somewhat, times are a little bit overwhelming for me. I don't know for anybody else. And so I take peace in this and in the sharing and the community that we build.
And you, of course, are the guitar player. When you perform out, you play guitar. There's not a CD with the book. You're an addition, correct?
There's not yet. We had thought about it. Jeff and I are close, and so we're very honest, and we can speak pretty directly to each other. And my thing was, I looked at this as sort of a triptych, that it was sound of spoken word as well as the image that went with the melodic and the chordal tension. And so it kind of, to me, all fit together as a greater piece. And I found that exhilarating. And so now I feel very inspired to know Jamie and Suzanne, because their poems inspire me as well. And I have a couple for them as well that we just didn't think we would improvise today.
I love it. It was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to just add something that I think about poetry, and I really hope that your listeners get to hear this. Is I think that music makes poetry more accessible. It's like a good entry point. And if people hear poetry to music, I think it reaches them. And I don't know if this is right, Blake, but I do think that in our country and maybe around the world, if you can make the poetry accessible, there will be a really large appetite for poetry among people. That's just my belief, and I'm trying to test that.
Well, listeners know that I run a poetry and jazz series in Point Arena, and you guys will be coming to read for us in November. And that's one of the reasons why we are so successful, is because we have music. People have a way of accessing poetry in a different way with the music. It really changes things. We've had as many as 9 musicians with one poet, and poets are kind of, sometimes when you're not used to reading with music, it can be intimidating. But if the musician is sensitive and really listening, the poet is the lead instrument, and you get to determine the pace and the phrasing. And
we really, I'm not just improvising and I have a chordal frame that I'm trying to play. When Jeffrey and I practice, there are very, very specific tonal sounds that have to occur at certain points within the poetry. So for us, although we hope that it does have a live kind of spontaneous feel to it, we really are working, trying to craft the tension of the chords with the tension of the story, with the visual manifestation as well. So I hope it does sound improvisational sometimes, but the fact is we're really trying to do it very consistently over and over. So
Gotcha. That's wonderful. Well, you guys sounded great. So I'm imagining, just by the nature of the way poetry is, as a poet, and I also play music. Music, there's a feel to music, but there's also a choral structure and a pattern that you're doing. But with words, I notice with my own voice, sometimes when I'm reading a poem, my phrasing, my intent, everything will change depending on how I'm feeling in that moment. I imagine that happens with you, Jeffrey, when you're reading, that you're not always reading your poems exactly the same.
That's exactly right, and it's funny because Brian and I have talked a little bit about that, and I've sort of semi-apologized because I think I make it very difficult for him because my mood affects my reading of the poem. The poems are very emotional piece of art, and maybe all art is emotional. So that if my mood is different, my reading is different, and poor Brian has got to come along with that.
But you know what, Jeffrey? It may have started out that way, but as we've been going on, we are very talkative about what we're trying to accomplish while we're playing. Because I know we'll sometimes I'll point it out to you. It's like, oh, that was a little clip fast this time, but we usually will stop and say, no, we're really trying to bring this tension at this part right there. And you are. I'm going to have to disagree with you as much as you think a lot of these poems you read different. Since I'm the lucky one that gets to read with you mostly, I would have to say you've become really pretty solid and convincing and consistent in your delivery. I just think it's real polished and pro.
Well, I thank Brian for saying that, but I didn't pay him to do that.
But it is true.
I want to remind you that you're listening to Be More Now. I'm your host, Blake Moore, and I'm speaking with poets and musicians of Sonoma Valley.
I'm looking at a poet's portrait of Point Reyes, and you've got a dozen or 20-something poems in this book. Imagining that do you have all of them to music, or are there just some of them put to music?
I have some of them to 2 or 3 different versions. It's what, as a poet, you get this. Jeffrey's poems don't have that explicit neither do Jamie's and neither do Susanna's. We'll talk to them, but they don't have this explicit 8-4-6-8 county type of thing. So what it really allows me to do is take a real open-minded look and listen for what's occurring, and how the I don't want to say the meter, but how the rhythm is unfolding for me. And then I go from that, because clearly they all have everything. They have rhythms to them. Otherwise they wouldn't be appealing to us. That's my opinion anyway. A lot of time with them, and I'm very pleased. They're my friends. My book's all beat up.
Well, they're beautiful books. Can you guys talk a little bit about why you picked the Valley and how you all came together to do this together?
We can talk about that, and I think we have different opinions because we have discussed it amongst ourselves in the past. First of all, I'd say I had originally looked at Sonoma County, but we don't have the bandwidth Sonoma County is huge. We just don't have that kind of bandwidth. Now, the Valley includes the town of Sonoma. That's an important fact because the town has all this history in it. It's got the Mission Church, which is 1824, I happen to know. It's got the Mexican Soldier Barracks. It's got the Bear Flag Monument in the plaza. So you have all this history. Vallejo's home is there, too. But it's missing all the agriculture, the beautiful vineyards in the spring when they're lush, or in the fall when they're full of colors. You've got the pastures with the cattle and these old barns that speak of generations of families. So all of that is in the valley. So I always thought that was the right size with the right interests that we would like to share in a format, and I think the book was the format we decided upon. I do believe that Suzanne and Jamie have other thoughts on why we chose that.
Well, I think it was a very wonderful kind of canvas to operate on. The Sonoma Valley has this history and the permanence, even the geology sort of permanence, and then as a poet you can overlay that with your own. Well, you're a more transient being, so it makes it's a really suitable setup, I think, for poetry. Your own emotions and transience superimposed on this much more historic place.
Well, one other thing, Blake, that I'd like to share about it. One of the things, and I mentioned this before about reading a poem from a poet that's passed away 100 or 200 years ago. One of the thoughts I think we discussed, we actually originally discussed this over coffee in a coffee shop, is that we would leave this book behind and someone would look at this book 100 years from now and see what the valley looked like when we were here and have an appreciation for how it's changed, because we have no idea how it would change, but I'm sure it would. And so they would be able to look at it at a point in time as compared to where they were at that time. And that was one of our thoughts, that we would leave this behind.
That really shows, and you really feel that. And the photographs are exquisite, so rich and detailed and just beautiful. So, in the radio world, you don't get to see these pictures. I'm curious, are these books available? How do people find this book?
Well, that's, I'm glad you asked that question, because that's been a struggle for us. We've done a lot of work to get it to the point here, but we're having a lot of difficulty with distribution. We're not doing this for money, because we're not making any money on this stuff. Artists don't make money on this stuff, and you probably know that yourself. But we want it out to others. We did have it on Amazon for a while, and we could put it back on. But right now, when we do a reading is when we sell it. And I know Jamie I can see she wants to say something, so let me pass this on.
Yes, you for Sonoma Valley Sonnet, the hardcover book, which includes the color images of Jeffrey Bartfeld, there are copies available through the Sonoma Valley Art Museum, and also at Reader's Books, Santa Rosa. At Copperfield's Books in Santa Rosa. Oh. In limited numbers, but to request, the bookstores could obtain for anyone if they were sold out.
And you guys took it off of Facebook Amazon for a reason of just not wanting to be available?
Well, yeah, I think I ought to put it back on Amazon. One of the reasons I came off is I wasn't getting a lot of orders, and I have to pay a monthly fee to keep it on Amazon. So it just didn't seem like it was working that way. But I could put it back on. And again, I'll be honest, I really want the book out. That's the most important part of these books. Yeah. Now, Point Reyes is very, very different, for example, from Sonoma Valley. Point Reyes, when you get there, you just smell the salt in the air coming off Drake's Bay and off Pacific Ocean, and the valleys are deep and the hills are dark, and it's primitive and rugged, and it's absolutely timeless. You feel like you've walked back in time, and there's, I think, this is an honest truth, Blake, I think that when your heart meets your mind, I think you find your soul. And I think that happens at Point Reyes, at least for me.
I think it happens in all sorts of beautiful places. It's something about us with a rugged, open landscape. You think of Ansel Adams and his photographs and poetry of Robert Frost. And, you really kind of get that feeling that you're in a long tradition of people noticing the beauty around us, the vast mystery of what we are. And I think both these books really capture that feeling.
Well, that's very well said. And I think you're right, Blake.
Great. In terms of all of you as writers, do you find yourself being inspired? Just you go and sit in a place? Or are you thinking back later on a rainy day? Or what's the inspiration for your work?
Well, I'll start. And the ladies, I'm sure, will have to answer for themselves. But I'm going to take it from a photographer's viewpoint. When I go to a place and I feel something there, that the place is calling to me, I look for a composition. Now, I think a lot of people feel like, oh, you go there, you snap a picture, and you got it. Well, that has never worked for me. I go there, and I can tell it's calling to me. So I'll go back there at dawn. And when I say dawn, I mean first light before sunrise. And look at it in this blue, cool light that you get at that time. Then I'll look at it at dusk, after sunset, before the last light, and then you got these golden lights. I'll look at it when it's misty, when the weather changes, different seasons. I know because I've calculated this from time to time, it takes me about 9 visits to a location before it reveals itself to me and says, "Here I am," and that's when I capture the shot.
Right.
That's how it works for me. I'm going to pass it on to the ladies, and they'll talk a little bit about their poetry.
Okay.
This is Jamie Sukowski, and I believe that poets are noticers. And I think that when we are moved by what we observe, and for me, it's primarily the natural world and the cycles of nature. And the wonder of it, I think, is the motivator for me to notice and to just have a growing and powerful appreciation. And this place, I think, really contributes to that, because we all know, all four of us, how lucky we are to live here, and our climate, our trees, our wildlife, and as we've found, even in both reading Jeffrey's book on Point Reyes and here, I think just being on this coast of California is just, it contributes to the riches and wonders of the natural world, and you feel it on a daily basis, and that's what inspires me in poetry, just that awareness and appreciation of where we live.
Hi, this is Suzanne. Another thing that's important to me is I feel like a poem needs to have some kind of meaning, and I don't know exactly how to articulate that except for with the poem. But anyway, I just written recently a poem called Ring Rain, and it's about Saturn's rings. But I start with like an idea with some meaning, but then as you go along, it fosters sort of all this subconscious stuff. So you start somewhere with an idea, and then you can follow that to all kinds of other realms, and it does take some time and work, but it's a really interesting process.
Well, I can speak, but only for a minute. I'm not really in this book, but it doesn't mean I don't write poetry. It doesn't mean I have some kind of function for me. We are in a poetry group together. I'm simply not in these books. But the way it comes for me is somewhat different. And I think for some other people as well, too. For me, it's laundry. The poetry is washing the laundry of my mind. It's the way when my hamper is overflowing with dirt, it's some way for me to cleanse it and organize it and fold it and share it. And that's pretty much the way it works for me. Slightly different feel to my work.
So I understand you're interested in creating a new book of poems and images focusing on the northern Sonoma coast. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, yes, I do. In fact, you're correct. I am interested in another book of images and poetry and music on the Sonoma coast, particularly around the Sea Ranch area. I love the energy there. I love the waves crashing and the hiss that they make. I love the birds above. And then the views with the golden light in the evening and the cool blue morning light. And then you get all this beautiful weather and mist, and it just makes for beautiful images. And I was thinking the sounds would be inspiring for a musician, and the images would be hopefully inspiring for poets. I'm hoping that Jamie and Suzanne, who's, by the way, I just love their poetry, I'm hoping that they might consider working again with me on it. And then, of course, I'm going to try to twist Brian's arm to compose some music about those images, but also about what he hears on the coast when he's there. So that's what I'm trying to do.
You better include some poems.
There will be poems. There will be poems.
Wonderful. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking with you all. What a outpouring of love for Sonoma County, Sonoma Valley, and all of us who live here. You know, especially I'm driving from Highway 1, and I drive through that area a lot. And so I see these wide open vistas, and I really feel just the beauty. And thank you for your tribute to a part of our California lifestyle.
And for what it's worth, Blake, I like how you read poems too. I happen to have watched you do a poem. I think it was dedicated to like the Arena Room or something like that was on YouTube, and I happen to say I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's really nice of you to say.
And we're so looking forward to meeting you in person, too.
Absolutely. So we have a reading coming up in Point Arena, and that will be third Thursday, November 2025, and that'll be Thursday, November 20th. So that'll be at the Record in downtown Point Arena. And I can't wait to have you guys meet you and experience your poetry live.
Oh.
Wonderful. So you were just listening to a conversation with Jeffrey Bartfeld, Suzanne Arenas, Jamie Zukowski, as well as musician Brian Abbott. And we've been talking about their two books of ekphrastic poetry, Sonoma Valley Sonnet and A Poet's Portrait of Point Reyes. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. And more information about their book at bmoreu.net. Letter B, MOREYOU.net. You can go on over there and check out the musing section and find out more. So I've got a couple of announcements for you. One of the announcements, of course, most important, is that 25% of KZYX's yearly funding comes from federal funds, and that's $174,000 for us. And that funding, as many of you, of course, have heard, is gone. So please don't wait any longer and step forward and become a member. Start a monthly gift or add a few dollars to your monthly gift that already exists. Now is the time as public media funding navigates this uncertain future. Support from you, our Mendocino County KZYX community, is crucial. Start your monthly donation now at kzyx.org or also by mail at P.O. Box 1, Philo, California 95466. Now is the time. And again, if you're already a member, thank you so much for your support. And if you do think about increasing your monthly donation or becoming a sustaining member, we would really appreciate it. Every dollar given goes a long way to protecting and empowering the KZYX programming that you rely on. Again, go to kzyx.org to donate. I'd like to make an announcement for a couple of events coming up at the Spirit House in Fort Bragg. On Friday, August 15th is a movie, The Last Ecstatic Days, with Adiseti J. Brown and Kim Rosen for a life-changing and potentially death-changing event, a portrait of what it means to meet death and the powerful and poignant journey towards it, undefended and curious. So it's going to be a combination of music and poetry, the movie followed by a communion of kirtan, poetry, meditation, and sharing. And on Saturday, August 16th from 1 to 5 is the Feast of Losses, a poetry dive workshop, again with poet Kim Rosen, for an immersive alchemy of poetry, music, movement, guided explorations, writing, and sharing as they open into all that arises, turning inward toward aging, death, and letting go. That's at the Spirit House Center in Fort Bragg, and more information can be found at spirithousehealing.org. And of course, this coming Saturday, August 9th from 1 to 9 p.m., the KZYX Summer Music Festival at the Casper Commons, with featuring the Real Sarah, Secondhand Grass, the Appaloosians, Brittle Season Trio, Stephen Bates, R.O. Shapiro, Francis and Ford. It's a benefit to support our public radio. And also there's going to be food, an auction, fabulous time for all. Please come out and support KZYX in Casper this weekend. Again, that's from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. The Casper Community Center is located at 15015 Casper Road, Casper, California. The gate will open at 12:30 and tickets are available at the gate. Again, 7 musical acts and food and an online auction. I'll be at the KZYX information table for a bit. Come on over and say hi. Hope to see you there. Well, thank you all so much for listening. In the spirit of Sonoma Valley, our wonderful Sonoma County poets, all of you, and this beautiful place where we live, I'm going to take us out with George Winston's composition, Peace. May peace reign for all times, in our hearts, in the world around us, in our choices. Have a beautiful evening.